An outburst followed by explosive testimony in a Winnebago County courtroom marks day 4 in the quadruple murder trial of Eric Jackson.
23 News reporter Jim Haggerty tells us how the day unfolds as Jackson's brother takes the witness stand.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury was all made up from the beginning.
The defendant's brother is called as a prosecution witness in the Eric Jackson quadruple murder trial. Codell Jackson is currently in the Winnebago County jail on an unrelated case. Jackson testified that he lied to police in a 2021 interview about his brother's alleged involvement in the 4 homicides. Seconds later, in the biggest shock of the day, Codell Jackson attempted to run out of the courtroom before being stopped by deputies. And when Codell Jackson returned to the witness stand, he told the jury he was coerced into telling Rockford police detectives his younger brother was involved in the deaths of Keandra Austin and her 3 children.
They was harassing my family, my auntie's house, my cousin's house. They're looking through windows.
Codell Jackson also said detectives threatened him with prison and a probation violation if he didn't implicate Eric Jackson in the September 17th, 2016 killings.
I played along to it. I shouldn't have, like.
Forensic pathologist Mark Peters, who performed the autopsies, also testified Wednesday, telling the jury that Keandra Austin suffered 5 stab wounds and was dead when the fire started. Peters said her children were alive during the blaze and all died the same way.
Asphyxia due to acute carbon monoxide poisoning due to a residential house fire.
A video of Codell Jackson implicating his brother in the deaths of Austin and her kids was played in court, along with photos of a gas can police found in the car Eric drove after the